Hi friends, how are you? Um, this is going to be a hopefully very quick tip, at least quick in my estimation or my view. Um, a while back in one of my videos, I briefly mentioned that something I had been thinking a lot about was how to interpret the court cards as advice. So if a court card shows up in a results or outcome position, or if you're doing a an advice reading and you have court cards taking up a lot of the spaces, or if it's a one card reading and you get a court card, it can be frustrating to interpret that as advice or an action plan, because they are qualities of a person or qualities of a path of development. And so, in my experience anyway, it can be kind of annoying when a court card shows up and what you're trying to figure out, is what do I do? Because they're active to varying degrees, but not, they describe characteristics rather than suggest behaviors, if that makes sense. Now, the more you kind of delve into the courts, the more you sort of discover behaviors and that sort of thing. But what's excuse me, still dealing with this cold. What's like a simple way to do a reading where you want advice and a court card shows up? Well, here's a thought. Now this is based in part on, this is the World Spirit deck, which was a Llewellyn deck, and it's from what I understand, it's out of print. But I learned recently that apparently the authors self-published another edition. I haven't gone in search of that yet, but I hope that's true because I love this deck. Now, in this deck, the court cards don't have the traditional names. The courts in this case are, let me get this in order. It's Seer is page, Seeker is knight, Sibyl is queen, and Sage is king. So we have Seer, Seeker, Sibyl, and Sage. And why I bring this up in this case is this has actually been a big impact on my reading, because it helped me understand the court cards in a way that I hadn't before. It gave the court cards a system that I hadn't discovered before. So it basically describes an evolution on our journey of growth. So the seer discovers something, they're excited about something, they see the early stages of it, they don't know a whole lot about it, they're going to learn about it. So they're at the first stage of their journey in whatever suit they're in. So in the suit of wands, whatever we associate wands with fire concepts. I'm going to touch more on that in a second. Then the seeker goes in search of it. They hunt it down. The Sibyl, I like the alliteration of seers, seeker, Sibyl, and sage, but it doesn't, a Sibyl is a seer, is a psychic. So in that way, it kind of ties it back to the seer. The words are, at least grammatically kind of interchangeable, with kind of more potentiality in the word seer. And I don't know that I have done a good enough job over the years assigning like a good slot to the cards that correspond to the queen, in part because the most traditional ones I've often viewed as kind of annoyingly sexist. So excuse me. I ultimately have settled on pretty traditional keywords as a nurturer, a creator, a champion, but it just doesn't feel fair, but it is what it is, and you may have better keywords for those. And then the sage embodies and is the master of, in my opinion. So why I think this is important is because these names are verbs, they're action words. And so what you want to do in order to prepare yourself to read the court cards as advice is consider some action words, some verbs. And the more active, the better. There's a tendency in English anyway, particularly for folks who haven't spent a lot of time thinking about writing, to choose passive verbs. And I think the reason for that is most people who think about verbs, well, most people don't think about verbs, probably, but unless they're nerds like me, but they encounter instructions or actions usually in like instruction manuals or recipes and that sort of, and there is kind of a passivity in a lot of technical writing. So what you want to do is you want to consider an active verb for each of your court cards. Now, what I've done is I've just gone through and suggested a few that are kind of inspired by what the World Spirit Tarot does, but that are a little bit more active. Because you want to make sure they're active, because in a device reading, you want to know what should I do. Now, these are just suggestions, and I've spent a little bit of time thinking about them. This is a little bit harder than I thought it was going to be to find words that really worked for me. But what you want to do is think about it as if you were getting advice, what kinds of words would you want to hear? And then how do they relate to the progression of the court cards? So here's what I've come up with. Obviously use your own, but for the page, I've got C, inspired by the World Spirit, discover, study, learn about, research. All right, so these are all active verbs. They're all things you can do. You can see something, you can go in search of or discovery of something, you can study it, you can learn about it, kind of similar. Or you can research it. Again, there is a little bit of an intellectualization here because the page is a student of. So these are all very studenty words. They're just beginning their journey. So when you see a page in a reading as an advice, these are things that it could suggest. All right. And then the knight is a bit more of a doer, right? He's a hunter. So what I have here is seek, which again comes from the cards, hunt, chase, pursue, track. Again, these are all kind of synonyms for the same thing, but they'll go in search of, they'll hunt down, they'll fight for, I could have put fight for here. The queen, I went two roads here. One is a little bit more kind of sexist, honestly, in my opinion, but it's also a little more active than the other two. So I went with kind of the stereotypical queen energy of nurture, develop, care for, champion. Nurture is really the big word there. Or you can go with the other quality of the queen, which is to sort of be intuitive or divine. So to intuit or divine, but that's hard. This is less active than these are, because it's easy to like care for something. It's easy to nurture something, but in order to intuit or divine something, like if you were capable of that, you'd be doing it already, right? And then for the king, he's sort of our black belt, you know what I mean? So embody, master, actualize, or manifest. Again, these are just words that I kind of searched for, but you could do your own thing. And then kind of like reading numerology, I'm going to come back to these in a second, in tarot, you then assign the element similar qualities, similar verbs. And so here's what I have come up with. Again, use what makes sense for you and what works for you. But for wands or fire, all right, we've got a very active suit. It's a hot, burny suit. So act on, create, burn for, generate, make, activate, beat. Vague enough that they could sort of apply to a lot of situations, but active enough that they're doable. Then for water, cups, feel, flow, wash or cleanse, anoint, run, flood. These are all things I thought about the element and the suit in general. So then for swords, air, consider, intellectualize, communicate, meditate, cut through, thrust at, fight, or protect. So again, you've got you've got the mental and the communication, and you've also got the fact that swords are weapons. And then for earth, again, like the queens, this is kind of the hardest one to make active, but ground, stabilize, grow, fertilize, host, spin, revolve, support, or give life to. So once you've got your sort of verbs assigned to each suit and to each what do we call them? Court. Then it's just a matter of kind of bringing them together in terms of a reading. And if you want to practice this, which I think you should, I think practice makes perfect. And so I definitely recommend doing it. Do these on little index cards if you want to. You can memorize them as you do. And then I would take all the courts out of your deck and think of a question. And again, some people don't like doing readings for fake questions. I don't mind doing that. But let's say my question was, how can I speed up my recovery from this cold? So I would shuffle my court cards and work with them specifically. Well, let me riffle, shuffle, and practice. Well, kind of. Taking this more so again, let's say my question was, how do I speed up my recovery from my cold? So I go through and I pick a card and I get the Seeker of Pentacles. So the Seeker is the Knight, and so I look at my Knight, and I see my verbs, and then I look at my Pentacles verbs, right? So really what I have to do is think about what kind of makes sense for me. So I should, all of these feel more active than I really want to be as a cold. So I think pursue is kind of like the gentlest for someone who's sick. So I could go with pursue, support, pursue something that's grounding or stabilizing. Those feel appropriate, right? So then I kind of make that into something that means more. So what would help me pursue support? Well, I could get advice from from a doctor, say. What could help ground me? I could stop running around so much. So even though because it's been a really busy week, so I could pursue grounding. I could seek grounding. Do you know what I mean? So that's one example. And then, I can journal about it or whatnot. But, then I can try something else, what should I do? This isn't real, but what should I do about this conflict at work? So I go through my court cards and I pick one. And I get the Seeker of Cups. So I have another. Let's go with something that's not that. Let's go with a Sage here, just to look at a different court card. So I've got my King. So my verbs are embody, master, actualize, manifest. And then wands, I've got act on, create, burn for, generate, make, activate, beat. So now I need to sort of think about how these apply. Embody creativity, for example, might be something good. So if I want to deal with this conflict at work, I could embody creativity to find a solution. I could, master beat as in conflict, right? I use that word as in like hit. But if I think about that as conflict, I could master conflict skills. I could actualize generation or actualize creativity to find solutions. In all of this, though, these are such active words, right? We've got embody, master, actualize, and activate on both of these cards. So whatever I decide, I need to take I can't take a passive path there. I need to be active about it. Let's try one more. And again, like if I were going more slowly and journaling about this, it would be a little bit richer, right? But I want to keep this to, oh gosh, it's already almost 15 minutes. Keep it to under 20 minutes then. But you get the point, right? If you assign verbs to the suits and the court cards, it actually makes it a little bit easier to look at these as pieces of advice and not just passive descriptions of people. which is one reason why they're hard to read sometimes. So let's think of another question. How do I spice up my relationship? Say again, that's not a real one, but it's a question we could get, right? Or it's one we might ask. So we pull a card and we get the Sibyl of Wands. So the Sibyl is the queen. So interestingly, right, really appropriate for a relationship, nurture, develop, care for. Under Wands again, act on, create, burn for, generate, make, activate, beat. Burn for is kind of a passionate thing. So develop passion, nurture passion, care for the passion. So do you see what I mean? So that's actually really good advice, right? If you're in a relationship. So you get the point. These could be whatever you wanted them to be, but thinking about the court cards as active energies rather than just passive descriptions can make reading a lot better. Even if we're looking at an outcome, see, I keep thinking of new things. Still, I'm under 20 minutes, so it's fine. Like, if I do a Celtic cross and the outcome is a court card, I could, depending on what the spread was about, although, they are pretty general, but, let's say it was a spread about love, and the outcome card was the Seer of Cups. So, oh, by the way, in this deck, the Seer of Cups is Pamela Coleman Smith, which I love. Ba-da-da-da-da. So it's a Page of Cups. So, how do I be the Seer of Cups? Well, I can learn about feelings. I can research how to cleanse my relationship, study the relationship, study the feeling, study the ebbs and flows of the relationship. That's what I'm going to need to do. So as an outcome, I'm not left with like, oh, you're going to end up at the beginning of a relationship, which might make sense in a Celtic cross about a relationship. It might say that the relationship's over or it needs some kind of renewal. That's fine. But if I want to read it as advice, I have my verbs. So I'm going to study or learn about feelings and flow. And sort of find ways to cleanse the relationship. Anoint might be interesting, right? Maybe it suggests marriage or some kind of sacrament. Excuse me again. So you get the point. Anyway, as always, I hope this is helpful. Do let me know if it is. Be well, and hopefully next time I talk to you, I won't be coldy and gross. Have a great week.